there's more rising of women being diagnosed properly or they had undiagnosed ADHD because we've been internalizing and masking a lot of our lives.
So many entrepreneurs secretly wonder if they have ADHD because, let's be real, the traits that make us visionaries can also make running a business feel chaotic. So that is why I've called in today's guest, Johanna Badenhorst. She is a psychologist, ADHD coach, and the founder of ADHD Her Way. She is helping high-achieving women design businesses that actually work with their brains. So she brings her clinical knowledge and lived experience all together in this episode. So if you've ever felt like your brain moves faster than your systems can handle, or if you felt like this one-size-fits-all advice just doesn't work for you, this conversation is for you.
Yes, if they don't have proper systems in place, they may appear quite chaotic and it might look more like ADHD. However,
Johanna, welcome to Unstoppable Success.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation because I personally haven't been diagnosed, but I suspect I may be a little bit ADHD. And so this is going to be a really powerful conversation, whether people are already diagnosed and they know they have ADHD, or if potentially they're like me and we're a chaotic entrepreneur and we maybe just don't understand why we're like this. So I'm excited to dive in because you are the expert in all of this, not just from your clinical experience, but from lived experience as well. So thank you for joining me.
Yeah, no, it's a really important conversation, I think. And whilst we hear about it quite a bit online or have for the last little while, it's been, I guess, a trending topic and something that, I put in quotation mark trending. It's not necessarily something it's just trendy to be ADHD. Although some people use that, it still stigmatise it quite a lot. It is probably just that there's more rising of women being diagnosed properly or even self-identifying properly, and that's perhaps where we're hearing about it so much more frequently because we've otherwise been internalizing and masking a lot of our lives.
Yeah. Okay, I have to ask, why are most entrepreneurs diagnosed with ADHD?
Well, it just so happens that it's probably a career choice or a direction that fits the ADHD brain or the autistic ADHD brain typically a lot better. They're probably a more traditional like corporate work or working for government where it maybe relies more on stability and job security and working in like a hierarchy. And for some people that ceiling is frustrating. It may be that there's the feeling of injustice and fairness that may take place that really grinds people's gears, and probably just the work pace that the 9 to 5 that's been created by capitalism, basically, is something that probably doesn't fit many people's brains. Like the neurotypical brains may be able to cope with that pace. However, for us ADHDers, it's probably boxes us in too much and we don't necessarily fit that typical way of working that wouldn't allow for those bursts of energy very well and the innovative ideas where it probably leads to burnout very often. And that's what I'm seeing a lot around the place as well. And more women in particularly, perhaps like traditionally it was probably men that were maybe again more seen as the entrepreneurial types.
Yeah.
Women would stick to, homekeeping and staying at home with their kids But now we've seen much more of a rise of women really making an earning of their own out of necessity too.
Yeah.
But also, and also ADHD women particularly because their brains are just much more interest-based.
Yeah.
So, following their passions. And so that's probably why we do see them much more in, ADHD much more in entrepreneurs.
Yeah. I always wonder, is it that most entrepreneurs are ADHD, or is it that business gives us ADHD? And I know that it's a clinical diagnosis, but is it the chaos of running a business and wearing 50 different hats that some people would then think, maybe I have ADHD?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. And ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disability or condition that you are born with. It is possible that you've been, like I said, internalizing it or masking it. And they may have appeared as, perfectionism and people pleasing. That seemed quite innocent and quite pro-social for us women particularly. The possibility is that people may be neurotypical in the business world. And yes, if they don't have proper systems in place, they may appear quite chaotic and it might look more like ADHD. However, it's probably more likely that it's actually that they had undiagnosed ADHD and that is bringing out those traits. And it's almost like, especially when it comes to burnout, it's the traits are therefore much more observable because people no longer have that capacity to mask so well or to hide their traits. And maybe it's the outlet of a business or, it's both the pressures, the impact and the demand that a business has that brings that out a lot more. And so it's probably a combination of those things that basically help a person or maybe in a way hinder, I suppose, their progress. But if channeled well, then, you don't have to be diagnosed ADHD and still do really well in business.
Yeah.
It's just about understanding your brain and how it works and to, leverage that rather than feel limited by it.
So interesting. What did your journey look like when you started to think, maybe do I have ADHD? What were some of the signs and things that you started to pick up on?
Sure. Yeah, I share this quite a bit on my social media because I do feel it's really relevant. And whilst as a psychologist, there is a bit of some thoughts that we shouldn't be sharing that kind of thing about our personal life. But I think it is really important to share about lived experience. And for me, I probably knew there was something different for most of my life. And many of the women that I work with say something similar, that it might not have been clear or that it was understood to be ADHD. For most of us, actually, we are late diagnosed, and especially if we have very internalized traits. And it looks like things for little girls in school, if you were to look back, because they do want to know that when it comes to, especially if you're going through a diagnostic pathway, they do look at like what things were like under age 12. And it may look like, again, some of those traits of, being quite rejection sensitive, emotional dysregulation, and forgetfulness. For me, it was probably, being very hypervigilant to criticisms and just being I was quite an active child. And so I couldn't sit still very well. But there's also the type of inattentive ADHD, which is a subtype, that probably looks more like daydreaming and kind of spaciness. And that's more typical for the forgetfulness and things like that. Whereas the more hyperactive impulsive type would have been like quite impulsive decisions, quite impulsive behaviors. A lot of like sleep struggles was a big one for me. So insomnia, you do hear a lot about. And that continued throughout my entire life. Then when the demands changed going to uni, I always struggled with, handing things in on time, or I'd be would hand things in really early out of probably anxiety.
Right. That was me. I would be like 3 months early when everyone else is cramming it all night.
Yes, but then I would open it up again and try and perfect it at the last minute, and I would have meltdowns. I would burn the whole assignment down and I would start fresh, like literally hours before it was due, because I was suddenly had so much self-doubt that what I was handing in was actually accurate. And I looked a lot to other people, whether, so like people-pleasing tendencies and like those like kind of more approval, because I had such self-doubt and, low self-esteem, and that is a really big feature of it as well. Those aren't typically in the diagnostic manual, but I find do come up a lot. The more typical traits that are in a diagnostic manual, like I said before, is like that forgetfulness and what looks like inattention, but it's just paying attention to something that they're actually interested in.
Yeah.
And, being able to hyper-focus, it could look like that as well in your special interests. And, also the hyperactivity, impulsivity. But for young boys, that's more typically what you'd see. And ADHD has historically been associated with. Whereas for us adult women, it probably looks more like at the far end where we're burnt out. We've been diagnosed with anxiety, depression, or misdiagnosed quite frequently for just being that. And actually underneath is like undiagnosed ADHD and autism.
Yeah.
And that's usually when they come to see me in like therapy, is when they've perhaps gone undiagnosed for so long, feel really misunderstood, feel frustrated and burnt out, and just want some answers.
Yeah.
Just feel, they may have fluctuating friendships quite often, are the typical floater or had been in high school.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's such a variation of like traits that aren't as commonly discussed, but are all tend to be part of it as well.
Yeah. Does it exist on a bit of a spectrum? So some people might have more subtle signs, some people have more extreme.
Yeah, so for ADHD, there is severity in the way that ADHD traits are displayed, and that can change on a person's capacity and all of that as well. However, it's probably that people may have more capacity to manage like their traits, and potentially they are more impacted, for instance, by hyperactivity and impulsivity, like a restless brain that's internalized, for instance, which I think is something a lot of people do struggle with.
Yes.
And so it does, there's no such thing as necessarily, they've kind of said like a spectrum is not, especially in the autistic world, they don't feel like that's a very fair explanation. In ADHD, it still is something that we probably don't use to describe the experience, but it could be explained as, the impact of the ADHD may vary depending on what life stage you are and how well you supported you are as well, like how many resources, supports like external to you, like whether you have a VA, all of those things will help mitigate what would otherwise maybe, feeling like chaos and disorganization, and some of those things could be really well managed with those kind of accommodations.
Yeah. Okay. I want to get into how people can manage this in their business. Do you see ADHD as being a superpower? Because obviously there's elements to that make business magical as well. Yeah. Do you see it being a superpower?
Yeah, so I quite identify with that type of language personally. Like I can see how our traits, and if we are well supported and we feel confident within ourselves, then it can certainly be used as a superpower. I can also respect that there's limitations or there's challenges that we may face as well. I think that's being realistic about things. But yes, if we are channeling our ADHD traits, which commonly we are known for, us, neurodivergent women in particular, we may be known for, being very innovative, being very like empathetic, or like be able to get really in touch with feelings over like the logic. And if we, can really tune into our intuition well, we may be really good feelers for what's going on in and around us.
Yeah.
Also, things like pattern recognition, especially for us ADHDers, is something that I feel is a really amazing trait. So being able to recognize what is happening in the world, where are the gaps, where are the solutions, being able to figure out, reading the room well, and those kind of things. Risk-taking is a massive one, obviously. Being comfortable with, or being quite adaptive to change. For some people, that's easier than for others, not necessarily for all neurodivergent people. However, I find that personally I'm quite adaptable and find it actually quite exhilarating to, to have new challenges come up or new opportunities. I find that really exciting.
Yeah. Okay. Love that. What are some things that people can implement if they're resonating with everything you're saying? Maybe they've been diagnosed. What are some top things that you would see would be key for people to implement into their business?
Yeah, so definitely having some kind of, even if it's a calendar or something of a system that works for you. So I know we talk a lot about, or you may come across lots of people recommending this is the perfect system for an ADHD, or this is like the solution to your struggles with disorganization. And whilst I appreciate that it sometimes can be really valuable to have those, it can also leave someone feeling really like a failure if they can't stick to that. So it is about trial and error and finding what works for you, but having some of a basic system of how you walk through, like whether it's customer service, onboarding clients, like that does have to be something of repeatable that you have, and you may need someone like a virtual assistant or an assistant to help basically be that part of your brain, your executive functioning, because executive functioning is something we deeply struggle with quite frequently. So that's like your organization planning, task initiation. And so be able to stick to schedules, because many of us find managing time quite hard. So if someone is there to be able to help us be accountable and maybe do some of that more boring admin work that we so much maybe despise, and, tasks that we find quite boring, is something that we would really help to have on board with us.
Yeah.
And so I definitely recommend that. Things like, I find AI amazing. They're definitely, as much as like I'm also a little worried of what it can do.
Yes.
It's definitely made such a difference for me. So for people to like really leverage like AI where they can, or some kind of, technology that really helps like smooth out processes for them is massive. So those would be the types of accommodation, and otherwise really routine-based things. So, really looking after yourself, your health and well-being. So nutrition-wise, your sleep and exercise, movement is, super underrated. For us business owners or, just general pop, like it's definitely something that, yes, is so basic and seems so simple, but we underestimate the power of that for the health of our business and that as well.
Yeah, I think coming back to basics for everyone is so key. If we're feeling like we're going too far towards burnout, if we've got too much on our plate, if we're, thinking about all the new ideas and trying to execute on everything, it's just re-grounding and recentering and making sure that we have things mapped out in the calendars. And, the health is so important. That's the one thing that went out the window when I was deep in my burnout is just I would forget to eat and look after myself. So
I know, which is a massive risk. Yeah. And that, same for me. There's times where, that's also when I started it was actually once I had children that the demands had gotten so high that I just didn't feel like I could cope in the way that things were going. Yeah. And that's why I did end up seeking a diagnosis myself.
Yep.
And that's why I do hear a lot of women are in a similar position where it's quite often at those either life stages or hormonal changes, like could be menopause, perimenopause is a big one as well. But otherwise it's like in the postpartum period or having the demands changed and like, owning your own business, and that's like stress can be insurmountable as well.
Yeah. Okay. I want to hear, and this is the podcast where we brag about our successes. So I want to hear, what is one of your biggest wins over your journey or even recently that you can give us your most unapologetic brag about?
Oh, yes. I know that this is not something that feels easy to do. And so I've gotten a lot better as of late to really celebrate things that have been achievements. So one of the biggest one was that I was really excited to actually more recently win the Osmompreneur Award for online education.
Yes.
Which was
so
massive
good.
And unexpected, actually. I've really enjoyed being able to provide support to women, in particular, ADHD women, a very different type of support I haven't before, and is something that I still don't see enough of in our industry, that we kind of have to wait till women to get burnt out before we actually are able to properly support them or that they engage with support. And I'm so frustrated by that for, the beautiful women that are going unnoticed, unsupported. Yeah. And so by making support more accessible, building community for women to really engage in, and then being recognised for that was really nice.
Yeah,
because
that's
it's
incredible.
Something that's not been easy to set up.
Yeah.
It's definitely because I think you cover it in your podcast as well, like forging that path as, kind of a thought leader or someone who's doing things quite astronomically differently takes so much energy and what we can, and being able to trudge forward and still continue on, I think is something that and juggling the two. So I've got my psychology, therapeutic business, and then ADHD Her Way.
Yeah.
It's been definitely so a beautiful challenge, but it's not come without its humps along the way.
No, that's incredible to be able to be recognized for all the awesome work you're doing. If people want to find out more about your incredible work, where can they find you? Yeah,
so they can find me on Psychologist Johanna on both Instagram and TikTok.
Yes.
And I'm also on LinkedIn. People can reach out to me there as well, where I do a combination of things like speaking events as well as having my online platform, and I really hope to kick off in-person events as well in
Yes.
Brisbane
Very exciting.
next year, so in 2026. And yeah, that's something that I've been meaning to do for so long, and I'm just really stoked. So keep an eye out for that as well.
Amazing. We will put all the links in the show notes, but thank you so much for just giving us a peek inside your world. You have so much wisdom to share. So thank you for sharing it with us today.
That's fine. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.